It began on an ordinary evening in our small apartment. I was in the kitchen, carefully preparing dinner, while the soft hum of the oven punctuated the quiet air with the occasional burst of warm light and a comforting aroma. Every movement felt habitual, each step in the routine that had long defined our shared life. Eric, my husband, moved about with a calm efficiency as he arranged the plates on the table. His gestures, so deliberate and familiar, wrapped me in a sense of security that both comforted and, strangely, unsettled me. I watched him from across the room, my eyes tracing the gentle rhythm of his actions. It was in these small, repetitive moments that I began to wonder about the quiet shifts in my own heart, feeling as if I were slowly fading into the background of a life that once felt entirely mine. In that simple domestic scene, the ordinary became a canvas for unspoken questions. The light from the setting sun filtered through the window, painting soft patterns on the worn wooden floor, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a stirring, a hint of something different waiting just beyond the edges of familiarity. Just as I began to lose myself in the quiet hum of the evening, my phone buzzed, slicing through the mundane routine like a spark in the dark. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years: Melissa. I hesitated before unlocking the device, a blend of nostalgia and uncertainty stirring inside me. The message was simple yet profound. "I've been thinking about you. Let's have a girls' night out. It's been too long, and you deserve a little fun." Her words, light and inviting, struck a chord deep within me. For a moment, I found myself suspended between the comfort of the familiar and the lure of something long forgotten, a side of life I had tucked away amid the daily rituals. As I read the text, I felt a subtle warmth, a reminder of a past filled with unguarded laughter and shared secrets. But that warmth was accompanied by a whisper of unease, as if my inner self was quietly questioning the boundaries of my current existence. Without fully understanding why, I sensed that this message was more than just an invitation. It was a call to reclaim a part of me that had been quietly slipping away. After I sent my reply, a soft smile played on my lips while my mind raced with quiet anticipation. In the hours that followed, every tick of the clock deepened my inner conflict, a blend of eagerness for the rediscovered spark and a persistent whisper of caution that perhaps the life I knew was slipping away. I wandered through the dimly lit apartment, every familiar corner now casting subtle shadows that seemed to hint at secrets buried in the routine of everyday life. I found myself pausing by the window, watching the world outside settle into dusk. The soft glow of streetlights and the gentle murmur of evening traffic merged with my thoughts, creating a backdrop for the swirling emotions within me. There was an undeniable thrill at the idea of reconnecting with Melissa, a chance to recapture moments of carefree laughter and unfettered conversation that had once colored my world in vibrant hues. Yet, intertwined with that excitement was a delicate sense of unease, as if this long-awaited invitation might awaken parts of me that had lain dormant for far too long. In that quiet solitude, memories of earlier, less complicated times drifted into view. I recalled afternoons spent wandering with Melissa through hidden corners of the city, moments when the future seemed full of promise and my heart beat with a hopeful rhythm. Those recollections mingled with the present, where every soft whisper of my inner self questioned whether I was ready to step out of the well-worn path I had built over the years. I wondered if I had been too comfortable in the predictable cadence of life, a steady hum that, despite its warmth, offered little in the way of genuine discovery. The room itself appeared transformed by the interplay of light and shadow, mirroring the conflict within me. Every familiar object took on a new significance, each echoing the possibility of change. I was acutely aware of how much I had grown accustomed to the secure boundaries of our small apartment, yet that very comfort now felt like a cage, gently pressing in as I longed for a taste of the freedom that had once been mine. It was a delicate moment of truth, where the past and present converged, urging me to consider a future that might be as unpredictable as it was inevitable. In that long, reflective silence, I allowed myself to feel both the light excitement of new possibilities and the weight of hidden reservations. The invitation from Melissa was more than just a call for a night out. It was an echo from a time when every decision felt filled with promise, and every conversation carried the potential to redefine who I was. Standing there, I recognized that embracing this opportunity would mean stepping into a realm of uncertainty, one where the comforting rhythms of my current life would be challenged by the lure of uncharted emotions. And yet, as I watched the dusk deepen into night, I realized that perhaps it was time to listen more closely to that long muted part of myself. The soft hum of the city faded as I stepped into Melissa's apartment, a space that was at once familiar and newly transformed by the aura of our shared past. The living room was bathed in gentle amber light, casting playful shadows on the walls, and every detail, be it the art on the shelves or the comfortable throw on the sofa, spoke of a life lived with vivid openness. Melissa greeted me with a warm smile that instantly bridged the distance of years. We settled into the plush, inviting cushions on her worn yet cherished sofa, the kind of seating that whispered secrets of countless evenings spent in heartfelt conversation. Over cups of freshly brewed tea, the conversation unfolded effortlessly. We spoke of memories that danced between the past and the present, the laughter of spontaneous road trips, the shared dreams of a future brimming with possibility, and the quiet moments when life revealed its most tender truths. As the evening deepened, so did our dialogue. Melissa's voice was soft yet compelling as she recounted stories of her own journey, of the choices that had reshaped her life in subtle but profound ways. I found myself opening up in return, admitting the quiet disquiet that had nestled in the corners of my heart. With each word, the layers of routine and expectation began to peel away, revealing a raw, unfiltered longing for authenticity. The room seemed to breathe with us. Time slowed down as if to savor the gravity of our revelations. I marveled at how natural it felt to be completely present, as if I were rediscovering a version of myself that had been waiting in the wings. Melissa's empathetic gaze and the gentle cadence of her responses built a space where I felt both seen and understood, a rare and comforting sensation. In the midst of our conversation, the space between us shrank, and our mutual smiles hinted at an unspoken connection that transcended the mere exchange of words. It was as if we were rediscovering not only our shared past, but also the spark of new beginnings. Small, luminous moments that promised change without demanding it. Every nuance of that evening was infused with a sense of belonging, a reminder that even after years of silence, true connection could pick up right where it had left off. The boundaries of time and expectation blurred further as we allowed ourselves to remember the simplicity of being, without the weight of the roles we had assumed over the years. There was no pretense, only the comforting acceptance of our true selves. In that delicate interplay of memory and possibility, the evening took on a quiet brilliance, as though each second was a gentle nudge toward a future yet uncharted. As the night edged toward its quiet end, I felt an unfamiliar sense of lightness mixed with introspection. Walking back to my car under the soft glow of streetlights, I realized that the evening with Melissa was more than a mere diversion. It was a moment of awakening. The familiarity of her presence had stirred something deep within me, a reminder that life was far more complex and vibrant than the routine I had grown accustomed to. That night, as I drove home, the quiet cityscape passed by like a series of soft, comforting snapshots. I knew that the conversation we shared would linger in my thoughts for days to come, guiding me gently toward decisions that I had long avoided. In the reflective silence of the drive, a new awareness settled over me. A promise of change, delicate yet unmistakably present, inviting me to embrace the unfolding story of my life. In the soft afterglow of our earlier light-hearted exchanges, the atmosphere shifted subtly into a realm of deeper inquiry. Melissa's gaze grew more attentive, and as if compelled by the quiet gravity of the moment, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're missing out on a life that's truly yours?" Her question, simple yet profound, broke the surface of our routine talk, inviting a dialogue that was as honest as it was unsettling. I paused, the familiar cadence of my thoughts momentarily disrupted by the unexpected weight of her inquiry. In the silence that followed, memories and hidden aspirations began to rise from the recesses of my mind. I spoke of dreams long set aside, those cherished ambitions that once sparked joy and promise, and of the gradual surrender to a comfortable yet confining routine. Each word felt like a release, a step toward reclaiming a part of myself that had been obscured by years of habit. Melissa listened with an openness that was both rare and deeply comforting. As I shared my unvoiced regrets and the subtle ache of feeling invisible, she reciprocated by unveiling fragments of her own past, a tapestry woven with moments of triumph, loss, and quiet resilience. Her stories were not dramatic, but they carried an undeniable authenticity that resonated with the unspoken parts of my heart. With every shared secret, the space between us seemed to narrow, filled with an unanticipated clarity. Our conversation meandered through the landscapes of our inner lives, touching on the silent transformations that had taken root over time. We discussed how the everyday familiarity of our surroundings had begun to feel like a gilded cage, where the beauty of routine masked a deeper yearning for freedom and authenticity. Melissa's gentle yet candid reflections encouraged me to see that my internal disquiet was not a sign of failure, but rather a call to acknowledge and embrace the changes long brewing within me. As the night deepened, our dialogue shifted into a careful dance of vulnerability and understanding. We spoke of the varied forms of love, the subtle comfort of a shared smile, the tender moments that often pass unnoticed, and the unspoken bond that forms when two souls recognize each other's truth. Even as I recounted the quiet sorrow of feeling lost within the confines of expectation, there was a growing sense of empowerment in my words. Melissa's steady support acted as a mirror, reflecting a version of myself that I had nearly forgotten, one that was capable of change, worthy of honest exploration, and ready to step beyond the confines of a life dictated by routine. In the final moments of our conversation, as the room grew dimmer with the approach of dawn, I realized that this exchange was more than just a fleeting respite from the everyday. It was a turning point. It left me both exposed and hopeful, aware that the journey toward rediscovery would be complex, yet filled with the promise of a life truly lived. In the days that followed our deep conversation, I found myself replaying every word, every pause, and every look we exchanged. It wasn't long before I noticed a subtle shift, a nuance in Melissa's presence that went beyond the familiar comfort of friendship. During our next meeting, as we sat quietly in a sunlit corner of a small cafe, the ordinary exchange of pleasantries gave way to a charged silence that neither of us could ignore. Melissa's eyes, usually so warm and understanding, now held a new intensity. In one quiet moment, as she gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, our gazes locked in a way that felt profoundly different. It was as if a hidden current had been set in motion, transforming our shared history into something more complex and vivid. There was no dramatic confession, no overt declaration, only the unspoken understanding that something had irrevocably changed between us. I left that meeting with a swirling mix of emotions. The realization that my heart was no longer entirely tethered to the life I had known came as a quiet shock. I began to see Melissa not just as a friend from a cherished past, but as a mirror reflecting the parts of me I had long kept hidden. With every encounter, her presence stirred memories and desires that I had thought were lost in the daily hum of routine. At the same time, I was acutely aware of the risks this uncharted territory presented. The comfortable, predictable rhythm of my marriage now stood in stark contrast to the unpredictable undercurrent stirring within me. Eric, with his ever-calm presence, had always been the pillar of our shared life. And now his absence in these private moments with Melissa made the new emotions all the more startling. Yet, despite the internal conflict, each meeting with Melissa offered me a glimpse of a life that was raw and unfiltered. A life where I could be wholly, unapologetically myself. We ventured through quiet parks and hidden cafes, our conversations delving deeper into personal revelations and quiet affirmations. It was as if every shared smile and thoughtful pause reaffirmed that the boundaries between us were dissolving. In that gradual, unexpected turn, I began to understand that the journey of self-discovery often requires us to embrace unexpected changes. The path ahead was uncertain, and the choices I was beginning to face were layered with consequences. But in those moments of mutual recognition, I sensed that the unfolding of our new relationship was a natural progression, a gentle yet irrevocable step toward a life that was, finally, mine to shape. In the quiet moments of solitude that followed my encounters with Melissa, I found myself submerged in a deep internal dialogue, a conversation that spanned the delicate interplay between past comforts and emerging truths. Each day, the routine of my life felt both a safe harbor and a silent cage. At night, when the hum of the apartment faded into a stillness that seemed to echo the unspoken questions within me, I would sit by the window, watching the shifting shadows of the city as I grappled with the reality of my inner transformation. My thoughts turned repeatedly to the familiar contours of my existence, the steady cadence of everyday tasks, the gentle hum of domesticity that had once brought comfort, now seeming to murmur reminders of all that I had left unexplored. There was a peculiar weight in these reflections, a sense that the life I had meticulously built was gradually unraveling, thread by careful thread. I recalled the moments of ease shared with Eric, his presence a constant in the background, reliable yet increasingly distant from the shifting landscape of my heart. The internal struggle was not a matter of simple choices, but a labyrinth of emotions that defied easy categorization. I oscillated between yearning for the familiarity of the life I knew and the allure of an uncharted realm, hinted at by every encounter with Melissa. It was as though two distinct voices resided within me, one whispering the safety of routine, the other urging me to embrace a more authentic, albeit uncertain path. The dissonance between these voices grew louder with each passing day, filling my mind with a ceaseless chorus of what-ifs and if-onlys. During long, solitary walks under the quiet glow of streetlights, I pondered the meaning of freedom. Was it found in the predictable and the known? Or did true liberation lie in the willingness to confront the parts of myself I had long buried beneath expectations? Each step felt like a small act of defiance, a personal quest to reconcile the fragments of my identity that had been splintered by time. I began to question not just my choices, but the very essence of who I had become. Had I sacrificed too much of the vibrant, spontaneous self I once knew in exchange for the comfort of routine? Or was this internal tug-of-war merely the precursor to a rebirth, a chance to reclaim that long-forgotten piece of my soul? In the silent hours of early morning, when the world outside still slumbered, the dichotomy of my emotions seemed to crystallize. I remembered fleeting moments of joy, the spark that had flared during our conversations, and the quiet laughter shared with Melissa, a laughter that hinted at a life filled with untapped possibility. Yet, those recollections clashed with the lingering familiarity of my domestic life, the safe rhythm of routine that now felt stifling in its predictability. I recognized that this inner struggle was not a sign of weakness, but a necessary reckoning with the realities of a life lived in half-light. There was a certain beauty in confronting one's vulnerabilities, in allowing oneself to feel the full spectrum of human experience, even when those feelings were tinged with uncertainty and regret. As I sat alone, often with only the soft glow of a bedside lamp for company, I allowed my mind to wander into the depths of what could be. I weighed the comforting weight of what I had known against the liberating yet daunting promise of change. In these reflective hours, I began to understand that the journey towards self-discovery was as intricate as it was inevitable. The struggle was not merely about choosing between two paths, but about learning to embrace the tension that arose from holding them both in the heart. It was in this delicate balance, between the familiar and the unknown, that I sensed the first true stirrings of a new beginning. The weekend arrived like a quiet promise, a much-needed escape from the familiar confines of urban life. Melissa had suggested a retreat, a small cabin nestled deep in the woods, where we could leave behind our routines and simply exist with the raw elements of nature. As we drove away from the city's constant hum, the landscape gradually unfolded into sprawling forests and open meadows, each mile drawing us closer to a realm untouched by our daily concerns. The cabin was modest, its wooden exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding pines. Inside, a gentle warmth radiated from a stone fireplace, and every piece of furniture whispered of a simpler time. It was here, amid the earthy aroma of pine needles and the soft murmur of a nearby stream, that I finally allowed myself to set aside the layers of pretense that had defined my life for so long. Days in the cabin unfolded with a natural, unhurried rhythm. Mornings began with quiet walks through dew-dappled trails, where the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves replaced the usual cacophony of city sounds. As I ambled along the forest paths, I felt a growing sense of clarity, a delicate peeling away of the accumulated weight of routine. The natural beauty of the surroundings stirred memories of youthful wonder and ignited a longing for uncharted experiences. Afternoons were spent in reflective silence and gentle conversation. Melissa and I would sit on the creaking wooden porch, sipping hot tea as the sun cast a golden glow over the treetops. In these moments, the words between us grew sparse, replaced by shared looks and the comforting presence of another soul who understood the quiet urgency of change. There was a subtle magic in the simplicity of these hours, a reassurance that stepping away from what was known could reveal hidden layers of our identity. In the soft twilight, as the sky deepened into a canvas of indigo and scattered stars, the forest seemed to come alive with whispered secrets. The isolation of the woods heightened every sensation. The crisp coolness of the evening air, the distant call of an owl, and the steady, rhythmic pulse of nature. I found myself opening up in ways that the crowded life back home had long stifled. Each conversation with Melissa, each shared silence under the vast sky, allowed me to confront questions I had long avoided about who I truly was and what I desired from life. That night, back inside the humble cabin, as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, I felt an unfamiliar sense of surrender, a willingness to accept that this retreat was not merely an escape, but the beginning of a profound inner journey. The quiet intimacy of the wilderness had laid bare my deepest thoughts and vulnerabilities, and in that exposure, there was a raw, almost tender freedom. I realized that the simple act of stepping away from routine was enough to unlock parts of myself that had been dormant, waiting for the chance to emerge. Returning home after our time in the woods felt like stepping into a parallel world. The familiar walls of our apartment, once a sanctuary of routine and quiet comfort, now appeared muted and distant, a backdrop that could no longer contain the vivid emotions awakened within me. As I crossed the threshold, a quiet stillness enveloped me, and every object seemed to whisper a memory of who I once was. I moved through the space as if observing it from afar, each familiar corner now holding the weight of my internal metamorphosis. Eric slept peacefully on the worn-out sofa, his presence a reminder of the life we had built together. A life that, until now, had offered unwavering certainty. Yet, the gentle rhythm of our shared existence no longer resonated with the newfound clarity pulsing within me. I lingered in the dim light of the living room, letting the echoes of my retreat settle into the silent air, and I realized that the change was not confined to the wilderness. It had seeped into the very fabric of who I was. As the morning advanced, I found myself drawn to the small details that once went unnoticed. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the delicate pattern of light and shadow cast by the early sun, even the creak of the floorboards under my tentative steps. Each sound and sight now carried a dual message, a reminder of past familiarity and a subtle urging toward a future uncharted. I sat at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea in hand, and allowed my mind to wander through the maze of thoughts that had taken root during those transformative days. Memories of the cabin and the candid conversations with Melissa played in my mind like fragments of a cherished dream. I recalled the unspoken understanding that had passed between us on the porch, the way the natural world had stripped away pretenses, revealing raw truths I had long suppressed. Those moments of clarity clashed with the comforting monotony of my daily surroundings, creating a dissonance that was both painful and liberating. I questioned the very foundation of my choices. Was I content to remain in the confines of a life that no longer felt like mine? Or was it time to embrace a change that, while uncertain, promised authenticity? In the quiet solitude of that morning, I sensed an undeniable shift in my inner landscape. The familiar had become a canvas for reflection, each ordinary detail an invitation to reassess my priorities. The apartment no longer felt like a permanent home, but rather a transitional space, a repository of memories that had once defined me, now making way for something new. I realized that the retreat in the woods had not only reawakened dormant desires, but had also kindled a resolve to seek a life that reflected my truest self. The days that followed my homecoming were filled with an almost imperceptible shift, a subtle stirring beneath the surface of my familiar life. Every moment, from the quiet solitude of dawn to the soft murmur of nighttime reflections, reminded me that the inner awakening was no longer confined to memories of the retreat. It had woven itself into the very fabric of my daily existence, urging me to confront the question that had grown louder with each passing day. How could I reconcile the two halves of my life without leaving one forever behind? I found myself standing at the threshold of two distinct worlds. On one side was the life I had always known, a routine built on shared responsibilities, predictable comforts, and the steady presence of Eric, whose unchanging nature had once been my anchor. On the other side lay the newfound horizon illuminated by my evenings with Melissa, and the raw, unguarded moments that had stirred a deep longing for self-discovery. Each encounter with the familiar now echoed with the promise of what could be, a life unburdened by compromise, where every emotion was met with honest reflection rather than silent resignation. In the quiet hours of a late afternoon, as sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, I sat at the kitchen table and allowed the conflicting voices within me to speak without restraint. There was no single moment of dramatic revelation, no overpowering epiphany that demanded immediate change. Instead, there emerged a gradual, persistent certainty that I could no longer live divided between two parallel narratives. With a heart both heavy and hopeful, I recognized that the path ahead would require a decision, a choice that might forever alter the contours of my identity. The realization was not marked by flamboyant gestures or loud declarations, but by the simple, profound act of accepting that growth often comes from embracing the complexity of one's own desires. In that quiet, reflective space, I resolved to step forward into a future where every decision, however delicate, would honor the authentic self that had patiently waited to be rediscovered. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful decision, the reality of my choice began to settle like gentle rain on a parched landscape. The life I had known, the safe, predictable cadence of routine and the unwavering constancy of Eric, now appeared as a cherished chapter of my past, its pages filled with both comfort and quiet resignation. Standing at the precipice of a future that promised renewal, yet demanded sacrifice, I felt the full weight of the moment. Every breath I took was a silent affirmation that change, however daunting, was inevitable. As the days unfolded, I began to navigate this new terrain with a cautious optimism. Each morning, as I rose to greet a world transformed by my decision, I sensed that I was not losing a part of myself, but rather gaining the freedom to pursue the authentic desires that had long lain dormant. The echoes of home still whispered reminders of a life once known, but in their gentle persistence, I also found the strength to look forward, to the unexplored possibilities that beckoned with every step I took away from the comfort of routine. Melissa's presence, once a subtle invitation, had blossomed into a steady reminder of what it meant to live fully and truthfully. In our quiet moments together, devoid of grand declarations, we acknowledged the fragile beauty of change and the bittersweet reality of an irrevocable choice. There were no dramatic gestures, only the steadfast commitment to a new beginning, a promise to honor the person I was becoming, even if it meant leaving behind the security of all that I had ever known. And so, with a heart both heavy with memory and uplifted by hope, I stepped forward. The past, with all its familiar hues, would forever be a part of me, but it no longer defined the boundaries of my future. Embracing the uncertainty of change, I learned to trust the subtle guidance of my inner voice, a beacon that promised renewal, growth, and the possibility of a life lived in honest, quiet fulfillment. In this final, transformative moment, I accepted that every ending is simply the start of something new, and that the courage to change is the truest measure of our resilience.